Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for the second Percussion Community webinar of the 2023 season. My name is Caleb Rothy, and I am the Percussion Education Coordinator for WGI Sport of the Arts. And I'm joined by our very special guest this evening. Chelsea Levine is joining us for our webinar tonight. Chelsea, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Chelsea and I are going to be chatting tonight about, of course, indoor percussion, a passion for both of us. But we're specifically going to be focusing on Chelsea's field of expertise, which is marching cymbals in the marching arts. So we're going to discuss all things cymbals tonight. We'll answer any questions that you have throughout this webinar and get as much knowledge shared as we possibly can. If you are with us here live tonight, please do feel free to ask questions during the webinar. We've got the Q&A feature available. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So if Chelsea mentions something or I mention something and brings up a new thought in your mind, feel free to get your question in there and we'll try to answer it live during the webinar. And if you're not with us live, but you're joining us by checking out a recording after the fact, we appreciate you spending some time with us for this and would love for you to join us live for a future webinar whenever your schedule allows. So Chelsea, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Can you start, for those that may not know who you are and all the amazing things you've done in the activity, would you mind just kind of giving us a quick rundown of your bio and your history in the activity?
Sure, yeah. I'll start with my marching career, which feels like a distant memory at this point. But I got my start back in 2006 at United Percussion. That's the first time I marched an independent group. I marched there from 2006 through 2008. I marched Rhythm X in 2009, and I also marched Gateway Indoor in 2011 and 12. And then for drum corps, I did 2 summers at the Jersey Surf and 3 years at the Crossman. So I was 11 independent seasons, all on marching cymbals. Since aging out, I've taught various schools and organizations, Centerville High School for a long time, Spirit of Atlanta, Colts Drum and Bugle Corps. I am now teaching the reinstated Crossman cymbal line this summer, which I'm very, very excited and humbled to return back there. And then upon aging out, besides teaching, in terms of dedicating myself to the marching arts, I founded Levine back in 2009. That's really when our first product came to light. And that was kind of with the idea of funding a cymbal scholarship for DCI and WJ cymbal players. So since its inception, we've given away over $30,000 towards membership fees, specifically for marching cymbalists. So that's definitely something we're very proud of. And that's fully funded by profits from Levine. And for those of you that don't know Levine, we make products specifically for cymbal players and now hornline players as well. So cymbal gloves, straps, pads, merch, books, and so on. Anything to really support the performer is really what we're after. So yeah, I love being involved in the activity from performer to teacher, and have taught clinics all over the world. And cymbals is sort of the instrument that I'm all in about and what I absolutely love and am passionate about.
Yeah, and you certainly epitomize somebody that has gained a lot from the activity and turned around and given that right back tenfold. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the webinar as we talk about some of the charitable work that you do and the cymbal scholarship and things like that. But I kind of want to start at the beginning. And this is, I think, maybe the favorite, like my favorite question that I want to ask you tonight. And that's this: why cymbals?
Well, like many marching cymbalists, I didn't make another part of the drum line. I actually showed up to United Percussion, we'll call them auditions, after auditions had already happened. I knew I wanted to keep drumming. I had no idea what indoor or WGI was. I just knew I was in marching band. I knew of drum corps, and I didn't want to wait till the next fall season to, start drumming again. So one of my instructors had gone through United Percussion as a member and said, yeah, you should go there. So I show up, I print out all the bass music. I'm in the bass room for most of the weekend. And they say, yeah, the bass line's already set. but someone always quits. So why don't you go hang out in the cymbal room and just give it a few weeks? I'm sure someone will bail. And then they didn't. That was the first year that they started and ended with the same baseline. Uh, so I ended up in the cymbal room, and it wasn't long after where I was like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. I love the physicality of the instrument. I always played sports as a kid. I still very much try and stay active. Um, and the fact that I could combine drumming and athleticism all together at once, I just fell in love with the instrument. I loved the demand, and of course, like the creativity that goes along with it. It's not just beats on the page that you learn, but it's kind of everything in between, with the visual element and all of the various techniques that you can play as well.
What would you say is kind of your pitch to a young percussionist that is, maybe looking at the battery? They're about to join their high school group or something like that. They're looking at the battery. They're looking at all the instruments that are out there: snares, tenors, bass drums, cymbals. What would be your pitch to somebody in that situation to convince them to pursue the cymbals as their instrument?
Yeah, I think it definitely attracts a special, certain kind of person. And one of my students once told me he had grown up, doing concert percussion through middle school and then, up through high school. And he was basically put on the cymbal line as a freshman and fell in love with it. And when they were trying to encourage him to, maybe try a drum out, he said the thought of putting on a harness sounded suffocating to him. Like
Mm.
he wanted the movement that came with being a symbolist. This guy was also had a background in gymnastics and whatnot, and he just loved the fact that he could kind of involve a different kind of movement aspect to playing an instrument. Um, and I also think that it's an instrument that's constantly evolving. So if you're sort of in the creative mindset, I think you can find a good home in the cymbal line because you're always trying to come up with new ways to play a sound, to move the cymbals, and I don't know, just be involved in the production in a different way than the rest of the battery really can.
Yeah, wow, what a great answer. And I love the idea of it's the only battery instrument where you're not wearing a harness. You're not wearing physically your instrument. You're holding it, you're
Mm.
manipulating it. And so yeah,
Yep.
that certainly I could see that appealing to some people going, I want that. I want
Yeah.
that kind of freedom of movement and those kinds of responsibilities. Um, I view the cymbals as such a unique instrument in the marching arts, kind of unlike anything else that we might have in these, pageantry marching style activities. What role
Mhm.
do you think that plays in what many people kind of refer to as cymbal culture or the cymbal community and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's often a misunderstood instrument. Um, if you grow up and you're a percussionist in the sense of, okay, you hold two sticks or two mallets, um, some of that knowledge that you've learned on your instrument doesn't quite carry over to cymbals, but a lot of it does. And I think that that's what kind of scares people, maybe deters them. They say, like, I don't really know much about cymbals. It's like, you actually probably know more than you think. It's still an instrument. You still play rhythms. There's still dynamics. There's still definitions and etiquette that goes along with it. And I think if you kind of change your perspective on it a bit, you can see that it's really just like any other subsection in the battery or in a marching ensemble. Um, every instrument has its challenges. You wear a bass drum, you can't see where you're going. You're wearing quads, they're heavy. Snare drums have it easy, but but rudimentally, it's very difficult. They're generally playing some of the more choppy music, and cymbals have theirs. It's physically very demanding to play the instrument. You have your implements are so heavy, and yet you still need to learn how to move them with grace and whatnot. And I think that if you can appreciate that aspect of cymbal playing, that maybe you'd have a better understanding of what the cymbal community really stands for, and that it's generally a group of people that really want to push the envelope and keep the activity moving forward. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that so many people fall in love with cymbals in the first place.
And it does, from my perspective, it does feel like such a neat community and such a tight knit, almost like fraternity. Once you're a part of the cymbal universe and a part of this community, they just seem to connect across all ensembles, all paradigms, all regions of the country. It's such a neat thing to observe, and I think part of the allure of the instrument has to play into that, at least to some point.
Yeah, it's like you've all gone through the same thing, and you're like, I get you.
I
I
get you,
totally
right?
get you.
Right. You know what this is.
You're my person.
Um, I was wondering if we could kind of look maybe holistically at the activity right now and think about, I'd love to pick your brain on what are maybe some positive trends that you've noticed in the world of marching cymbals, maybe in the last 5 years or, last 10 years. I know we're still recovering from the pandemic that we all went through, but, what are some of those more recent trends that you've seen in the activity, positive trends that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that I think you're attracting people that really want to play cymbals. I don't think it's a subsection that is just cuts from other sections of the group. And when you have people that chose to be there in the first place, obviously they're going to be more encouraged to try and perfect their instrument, perfect their show. I also think that, I mean, musically, I think cymbals are paying a lot of attention to, sound quality, the rhythms that they can play, not necessarily just cramming every note that they possibly can and trying to sound like a bass line, but really contributing to like, the overall sounds that an ensemble can create. And then visually speaking, I think that every year, a cymbal line is really pushing the envelope of what they can do. And I know that that's a goal as a cymbal tech. At Rhythm X, we sort of, at least within the cymbal line and really the full ensemble for that matter, it's that if it's something we've done before, we don't really want to do it again. The standard of last year isn't good enough for this year is sort of the mindset. So we're always trying to come up with like the next big thing. Um, and if you saw our 2022 production last year, there was a cymbal solo, which I never would have thought even just a few years ago that that would be something cool, and that we could really pull off a moment where there's quite literally only a single cymbal player on the floor at a time. And, it was one of the loudest applause that you heard in UD Arena last year. And we really, pride ourselves on that and what the rest of the cymbal line was able to accomplish throughout the season too. I feel like the judges are really catching on and getting more antiquated with the instrument and giving the credit that I believe cymbal lines deserve.
Yeah, excellent points. And you're right. Some of the programming that is happening for cymbals now are some of the largest crowd reaction points in a program, and end up becoming some of the most memorable hallmarks in some of the presentations in recent years. So I think you're right. It's definitely come into its own, and is capable of generating just some amazing crowd reaction and response in performances.
Yeah,
Other
and I
side of the
think it's
coin, have you noticed kind of any negative trends or patterns that you'd kind of like to see us all collectively move away from in the activity?
I think I think a lot of people, whether you're a designer, a judge, a battery tech, whatever the case is, I think that you often shy away from the things that you don't understand, or that you don't feel like you have the knowledge to support. Um, and I would encourage people to watch a show, through the lens of a cymbal player, whether you're, again, a judge, a designer, a battery tech, and really take a look at what the cymbal line is able to accomplish, because there's a lot of intricacies in it that if you catch them, you're like, wow, that's really, really impressive what they were able to do in that moment. For example, um, you don't just play the crash, but maybe there's some sort of toss or visual moment that like went with the battery music. So, there's a, I don't know, a big shot in the snare line and the cymbal line hits a note and plays the crash. And all of a sudden you're visually affected by the fact that they took the time to think, okay, that's what the rest of the battery is playing. We're going to line it up with that, and therefore be as integrated into this moment as possible. And I want people to start noticing those things. I'd say it's trending upward. I wouldn't say it's trending downward by any means, but I think that it's sort of time to get on the bandwagon and kind of immerse yourself in some of the intricacies that a cymbal line really has to offer.
Yeah, and that kind of perfectly leads to me into the kind of the next question I have for you, the next conversation that I want to have, which is just like, where do we go with this? And so I want to start first by saying, how do you integrate cymbals kind of into a full battery warm-up routine? You talked about how they can do things in the show that pick up nuances in what the battery is doing. Let's start with the basics, the warm-up routine. What's your approach to integration there?
Yeah, I've honestly changed my mindset about this over the years because I used to kind of see it as this sort of physically draining moment for the cymbal line before the real show or the real rehearsal or whatever the case is. And don't get me wrong, it is physically demanding to, be part of those moments, but I think that the benefits far outweigh that. So at Rhythm X, we're in almost all of the warm-ups. We don't play with eights and we don't play with rolls because there's so many variations, but we do everything else in between. And my thought is, from an emotional standpoint, first of all, why should they be left out of that opportunity to perform or start the day? So in a rehearsal setting, the battery set up in the arc. Cymbals are part of the battery, right? They get
Yes.
to start their day with them. They're setting the drums up, we're setting the cymbals up, we're drinking our coffees in the morning, saying hi, whatever the case is, and then we all get to start with that, first musical downbeat together, and we get to, be there. You to have a season or a relationship that's memorable, you need quantity, because without all of these interactions with these people, there's not an opportunity. There's less opportunities for quality if you're not
Mhm.
there all the time, right?
Mhm.
So I think that that's a big part of the emotional side. From like the technical side of things, I mean, what part of a music ensemble doesn't need to work on rhythms and sound quality and tempo maintenance? And we make it our own so that it benefits us as well. So, for example, at Rhythm X, we play a accent tap double beat warm up. The cymbals have parts written to that, but we also have visuals written to that. And we try and put some of the more difficult things that we'd like to see in the show in these warm ups early in the season before we ever even get show music. So then we're getting all of these repetitions on them. When it comes time to getting show music, we can say, oh, yeah, the part in accent tab double beat? Let's put that in this part of the show, and we can change up this a little bit, and so on and so forth. And they already feel rehearsed with a piece of vocabulary that they want in the show, which is really the same as the rest of the battery, right? Like if you play, I don't know, tap drags in the show, you probably want them somewhere in your warm-ups too, so that, you're getting the reps on them there as well. So that's definitely a big part of it. And then once it comes to show season, it's just another opportunity to perform. I mean, you know what it's like at WGI finals in the lot. It's like you're at a rock concert, and to be standing there outside the circle watching other people drum, I don't know, that just doesn't sit right with me. I want to be part of that moment. Um, and so we are. And I think that there's a smart way to write the music and write the visual element to it so that it's beneficial for the cymbals, but that they're also, included in that experience.
Yeah, I love that for you, it starts from this idea of making sure that your symbol line is included and integrated into the battery, that it's not, physically, it is different. There are different training aspects that come into it.
Yeah.
And obviously you're going to be separated for that. It's rudimental, not in the same way that you would play on a snare and a tenor and a bass. But in terms of the experience of the performers, you want them to feel like they're a fully integrated part of that battery and a fully integrated part of the ensemble rather than this other thing that's out there. And so I love the approach starts with kind of the performer experience and what you want them to get out of this. You're right. The lot at WGI Finals is like a rock concert. I don't want my students to miss out on that. I want them to be, full participants in that full experience, regardless of what instrument they play. So what a healthy perspective to have, and hopefully one that everybody that is checking this out can bring that back to their ensemble and think about that in their rehearsals and their performers in the ensemble, what kind of experience we want to give them.
Yeah, through and
Chelsea,
through, I stand by that.
yeah, I think it's great. We had a couple of questions that came in through some social media channels, people, throwing in some questions. I want to make sure that those got into our talk tonight. So the first one I'm going to share from you, I think came from Tyler, who I think is on the call with us tonight. And he was basically talking about this. He noticed that it seems to be harder right now in 2023 to fill cymbal spots coming out of the pandemic. Maybe harder now than it was pre-pandemic. He's seeing lots of vacancy posts on social media, people looking to, hey, we're still looking for a couple more cymbal players. Do you have any recommendations to help recruit and retain performers into cymbal sections? Specifically, and I know this is important for Tyler, specifically trying to retain and recruit people into groups that aren't necessarily the top level ensembles that already have their built-in draw. But we want that to be a healthy ecosystem up and down the activity. So what kind of tips might you have to address some of those challenges that he's seeing?
Yeah, well, first I'll start with, coming out of last season where we had the oldest class of performers that you could have, we had a ton of turnover ourselves. We had over 30 age outs in Rhythm X, alone. That's a lot of spots to fill. And then when you, kind of combine that with the fact that some people took a couple years off of drumming, sort of fell out of it. It definitely, I think, left everyone at a deficit, not just cymbal lines. But then when you take into account that there's just generally less cymbal lines than there are, say, snare lines, not every high school has a cymbal line, not every drum corps has a cymbal line. You're just pulling from a smaller class of group of people. So I definitely think that that's legit and a valid setback or growing pain going into this season, seeing some of those very veteran members age out. I think in terms of retention is at the end of the season, you never want to have to beg someone or even convince them to come back. I think as the instructor, it's our jobs to deliver an experience to them where they want to, and if they don't, they probably have a good reason, not to come back. And I think that that's a opportunity for self-reflection too. Well, why did they not like this? Is there something that more we can do, for the performers to make this more enticing for them? So I think that's the most important part of retention. Of course, there's going to be outside factors that you can't control. Maybe their excuse or reason is money or school or whatever. And I'm very hands-on with trying to help my students figuring out those logistics, because I think as a 14-year-old, if they're in high school, or a 21, 22-year-old, I think a lot of people have trouble grasping on to how to manage those logistics. They see $2,000 membership fees, and that's the most expensive thing they've ever seen in their lives. They're like, $2,000? To you and I, it's like, okay, it's $2,000. Like if you work at Chipotle for a few weeks, or
Right.
30 hours, every week for a few months, you can pay your membership fees. But I think that there's sort of a disconnect of how to create that plan and really make it happen. So I try and be very hands-on. Same thing with the school aspect. Okay, well, can you take an online class? Can you switch your Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes to Tuesday, Thursdays? There's really ways around almost every hurdle. And I try and have a very hands-on approach to that. And then lastly, like in terms of just straight up recruiting, I think you have to be pretty hands on about it these days. You have to take advantage of who your personal contacts are. If you're an independent group, okay, what are the high schools around that have respectful programs, that you know want their students to come and be part of yours? Uh, what's the reality? Is there a world class group in your city and you're the open class group? Like reach out to the world class group. That 10th snare drummer that didn't get a spot yeah, at that ensemble is probably maybe good enough to be in your open class group, you know, and take advantage of the fact that there are people that want to drum and or play cymbals or whatever the case is around. Um, but I think you really have to reach out a little bit more than you used to, especially after the fact that people have just been in their rooms and on Zoom for 2 years, and you know, getting out of the house as it just takes a little bit more effort these days. I think for everyone. And you know, once I do start reaching out to people, I want to make sure that they understand what it would take to be part of the group. Because again, I think that even if they're skilled enough, they might count themselves out, or they don't realize how good they are. And
Mhm.
they need to do, all you got to do is just come, just get them in the door, and then you know, kind of figure it out and take it from there.
Yeah, I think when you think about the people that we're trying to draw into our programs right now, the young people that we're trying to bring in, and you think about their experience going through the pandemic, they just kind of stopped doing things for a couple of years out of the house. But more importantly than that, stopped putting themselves out there for things. Like that's a big thing that got disrupted. So I think you're
Hmm.
spot on in talking about like we're going to have to recruit harder than maybe we used to have to, because we're going to have to convince some people to step out of their comfort zone and hey, come out, try this, come to a rehearsal, come to an audition, come be a part of this. Hey, you've never played this before, come try this, I'll show you how, I'll teach you. And create a a welcoming environment that brings them in, and then just like you said, use that contact tree and try to get in touch with all the places that might be sources of potential membership. Like you said, get them in the door, that's the first step. And then after that
It's,
you can start talking
yeah.
about, okay, what are you going to play, what's your role going to be, and how do we make sure that you're loving the experience here, so this is something a you want to continue doing, and b, even if you are going to level up maybe to another ensemble down the road, this is something you're going to tell your friends and other people in your personal network, like, hey, go check this out, I had a great time there, great experience. That's how the activity
Exactly.
stays healthy.
Yep. Got to
Okay,
start
so
somewhere.
we got another question also from the community, and this one is, let me just read it here. Can you share your recommendations on the types of products that you found to be most successful? Um, I think kind of through the angle of like, hey, for a new director or a new tech that might be looking for a starting point, maybe they're about to make a purchase or rent or borrow some equipment. What, being the guru and having the experience that you do with this, what might be some of your recommendations in terms of size and weight and other go-tos to consider when you're looking to outfit an ensemble? And I'm going to add an extra wrinkle to this. The person specifically said for many different types of ensembles. So like for a drum corps, for a high school, for an independent indoor group, for a college program, for a non-competitive group like a sports drum line or a stage entertainment show or things like that. So in your mind, Chelsea, what are some of the factors that go into it? What are some of the things that you would weigh, and what are some recommendations that you have for people that are checking out our webinar?
Yeah, so let's start with the physical like symbols themselves. Almost every WGI symbol line is on an 18-inch symbol these days. Um, some of the West Coast groups go 19 inches. Very rarely will you see anything bigger than that anymore. So I think 18 is safe. Um, you could have a high school aged person comfortably moving a pair of 18-inch cymbals, and also a college aged cymbal player. I think you can also consider the finish. So this is like a natural or traditional finish rather than brilliant. It kind of looks more like a mirror. And I think that this just stays looking better for longer. So especially if you're not in a position where you're refreshing your cymbals, every season. I just generally like how these look better. Yeah. So natural finish versus brilliant. And then in terms of the style of cymbals, it's really budget dependent, I would
Mm,
say.
yeah.
I always lean towards more of a concert style cymbal, even for a marching cymbal line, whether that's DCI, WGI, college. It's just typically a more refined sound. So you can do like a Viennese or a French cymbal, and all the cymbal brands have that style of cymbal, and they just sound amazing. If you're looking for something a little bit more budget friendly, uh, all of the mainstream cymbal companies kind of have tiers from there. Typically, if there's a cymbal that has the word marching band in it or marching or outdoor, it's probably one of the more budget friendly cymbals, but they also are pretty heavy, which then makes it difficult to manipulate, and they don't typically have the most refined sound. That's the difference between spending 300 and spending $800 on a pair of cymbals, or really anything. You kind of pay what you get uh, for that. So that's, I think, some of the more important aspects, at least for the physical cymbal itself. And then from there, you have, cymbal pads and cymbal straps. My company, Levine, we make these. So do other companies as well. I prefer a nylon strap over leather. I think they last significantly longer than a leather strap does. They can, from sweat, just sort of dry rot and rip and break
Hmm.
over time. These typically do not do that. You can even tape the knots on the other side, and you're never like having to tighten them mid rehearsal. Yeah, they last essentially forever. Our pads are actually made out of recycled tires. So it's rubber with some fabric on top of it. So those also don't break down as easily as, say, leather or pleather do that other companies make. So, I think if you're really trying to be budget conscious and choose something that's going to last a little bit longer, definitely consider the materials that they're made out of.
That is all such great advice, and hopefully something that everybody can catalog right now and go, okay, my next round of purchases, these are the hallmarks to look for.
Yeah.
Corollary to that, are there any things that you've learned through the years that are like, definitely look out for this and avoid? I know you mentioned like the marching band and stadium style symbols and stuff like that, but are there any other things that everybody needs to know out there of like, hey, try to avoid this, or here's a mistake I've made in the past and you can learn from my mistake and not go down that same route?
Don't polish your cymbals. That's probably the best advice I can give, unless they are so far down the hole of being taken care of and it's like a last resort. Just don't do it. Um, all of my cymbal lines, they carry around like basically a bottle of Windex and a microfiber cloth. And after every single time they use the cymbals, they wipe them down. They spray on the cloth, they wipe them down. It gets all the oil and the fingerprints off of the cymbals, and they stay looking great for a long time. These cymbals here are like 3 years old. I use them all the time in lessons, and there's barely a spot on them.
Yeah,
So
they look fantastic. That's such great advice, because I have to imagine that there a huge swath of people out there are still buying the bottles of polish and having kids go to town on the cymbals. So if there's a better
oh yeah.
way and an alternative way, you've heard it. Now we've got the knowledge, we can
Yeah.
take that forward. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Chelsea, tonight is a question that I think about a whole lot. And that's, let's say I'm listening to this right now and I'm a current battery instructor, or maybe I'm even in an ensemble, and I'm aging out here in the next year or two, and I want to start teaching. I want to get into that a little bit. So for somebody in that scenario, they may have some personal experience on snare or tenors or bass, or maybe even a combination of those three, but possibly no personal experience on cymbals. If I'm in that situation, either teaching now or I'm about to teach in a couple of years, how do I get started on better serving my students?
Yeah. So
Specifically my
I
cymbal
mentioned this.
students. Probably I should mention that. How do I get started better serving my cymbal students? Maybe if that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I want to say, as I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you probably know more about the instrument than you think you do. Rhythms, dynamics, it's the same. And if you do hear eighth notes jumping all over the place, they're not playing in time. If you can clean that on a bass line, you can clean it on the cymbal line. Also, just look, if they are doing something that is seemingly supposed to be unison and it's not together, um, point that out to the cymbal line. I think that just that's some like very surface level information. Is take the knowledge that as a musician to any other instrument and apply that to cymbals. But maybe this is a good segue for some more specific cymbal knowledge, which is, so I've put together a free video series. It's called Levine Cymbal Education. I'll actually share my screen so you guys can see this. Let me full screen this. So on here, this is the cvine.co. If you click on education, it brings you to this page. We have over 50 free videos, all broken down from the very basics, like cymbal cleaning, like we just talked about, and strap tying, how to just put the cymbals on your hands, all of the various playing positions that you can be at, every sort of flip that there is, various crashes and crash chokes and sound effects, all the sounds that you can make on a cymbal. Then getting into some of the more advanced aspects of cymbal playing. So there's various grips, different ways to hold the cymbals, which make some of the visual elements a little bit more interesting and fun. And then there's really two categories of visuals, which is release and reloads, which is where you have your hand in the strap, but your thumb is not hooked in and you're swinging them around in one way or another. But then also what I would consider a very advanced skill, which is juggling, which typically means that your cymbal is not through the strap at all, and you're kind of throwing or manipulating the cymbal through the air. Now, these are all individual short videos. If you click on any one of these, you get the video, you get bullet points, but you also get audio tracks to the exercise that's demonstrated in here. These were all written by Brian Harmson. They're at different tempos. This is on every audio streaming service that's out there, Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, and you can use these as play along tracks. Now, if you're someone who's not as much of a visual learner and you don't want to watch all these videos, I've also put together a book, and this is very detailed. You got all your pictures and captions here. There's a little QR code right here that brings you to the corresponding video. It's very, very thorough. So the information is out there. If you want to learn about cymbals, there's more than enough to get started and even get you up to some of the advanced skill sets. I know that there's high school lines who bring this book with them to subs, and the techs are kind of running rehearsals from that. And I know that there's world-class lines going down each video and kind of checking things off as the season goes. So, and again, that's all free. cvine.co, click on education, and all of the videos are there for you.
So again, one more time, everybody, that is free. It costs absolutely nothing to take a look at the resources that are there. So as an educator, it's definitely something you should have bookmarked and be checking out, especially like we mentioned, if your background is snare, tenor, bass, and you find yourself standing in front of the full battery now and not exactly sure how to give high quality information to your cymbal line, it's right there. You can teach yourself and be way more conversant with all the details that you'd want to share with them. And Chelsea, would you also, do you feel like that website is something that you would turn over to students as well and say like, hey, I've got 5 cymbals or 5 players in my cymbal line. Here's this website, go check it out, investigate it, start learning some new tricks, check out some of the juggling in here. And let's see what you're able to figure out. Is this performer friendly as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've heard from, various instructors from around the country, even international, that are just like, yeah, I don't have a dedicated cymbal tech. Like, I don't have one. Like, what do I do? And it's like, buy them this book or go to our website and just start, checking off each video. And I know a ton of schools that are doing that this winter, and it's great. I get videos all the time from people like, "Hey, this is how we're doing." Like, you know, thanks, or do you have any tips? I don't know, reviewed videos here and there,
Yeah,
and it's fun,
it's part of that simple community that we talked about a little bit earlier. Yeah, and I
That's
know
right.
that there are a lot of programs out there that have a simple tech that takes care of that. I know when I was teaching most of the programs that I worked with, we had somebody that specialized in that, and you could always just count on they'll take the students from A to Z. But I know that's not the majority of our programs in the activity. There are a lot of ensembles that are participating in WGI or in their local circuit that don't have a dedicated cymbal tech. So if you're in that situation, you can still pick up a bunch of this knowledge just by checking out some of the resources that are out there, and it'll make you, that much more powerful as an educator, and hopefully help your ensemble be that much more successful.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually have one more resource that I meant to mention. So let me pull this up. This is also um, on the Cvine website. Give me a second. Let's yes. So if you go to the Cvine website and instead of clicking education, you click on media here. There is hours and hours and hours of lot videos from basically every year dating back to I think 2016, all the way from PSA, PIW videos. Click on here, and you can kind of watch what all these cymbal lines were up to in that various year. And I think that this is a great way to pull in inspiration, but also to see some of those basic techniques integrated into a performance setting. Like, you can watch, any one of these cymbal lines and say, "Oh, okay, I see. Okay, that's a gumption crash. That's a crash choke. That's a bucket dip release or reload that I saw them do." There's really a lot of great knowledge you can gain just from kind of seeing it in the moment too.
What
So that's
an
just all out
amazing
here for the taking.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what an amazing time to be a percussion educator with the wealth of resources that are out there, and the number of just amazing examples that are a click away. And the Cvine website has a ton of great resources there. I know you also have a YouTube channel that I was perusing a couple of days ago that just have this wealth of videos that are out there. So you can really get in there and check out what all the groups around the country are doing, and then borrow that, bring some of that back to your program and go, "Hey, I saw this thing, let's try it." Or
Yeah,
turn
and
that
I'll
over to your
I'll I'll,
students.
I'll say too. We also have a Discord server, which for anyone that doesn't know, it's like Slack for the youths. And it attracts a lot of people who game, but we have one specifically for Cvine and the marching activity. There's something like 300 people in the Discord server, and we have all these different channels set up so you can ask things about, you can post about job openings. There's cymbal students or performers that post sheet music looking for, ideas on how to split it up. There's people sharing lot videos. It's just another great way to connect with other educators and cymbal players. So that's the Cvine community Discord, and you can find a link to that on our website as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chelsea, what is one thing that you wish more percussion instructors better understood about cymbals?
Oh man. Well, there's a few. This is sort of a surface level one, but I wish people knew that it was easier for example, a snare drummer to push a prop than it is a cymbal player, because we don't have our hands available. So that's one thing I feel like people say, "Oh, you don't have a drum on, so it's easy to push or move this thing." It's actually a lot more difficult for us than it would be to, somebody who can put their sticks in a stick bag and push something and be back in the music very, very shortly after. So that's one thing I wanted to say for sure. I think on top of that, I think there's a lot more thought that goes into putting a symbol book together than people might realize. At least at RhythmX, for example, whenever we're writing a symbol visual, the very first thing we do is look at the battery score and we see what's going on. Okay, wow. Okay, the bass line, they have this big run that goes from, this count one to the next count one. Let's try and have a ripple that goes with that bass run, or a visual that starts on one and ends on one and just has this sort of continuous feeling to kind of add to that music slash visual effect. So there's a lot of detail for just about every movement that goes on with a cymbal player. If there's a big shot from the upper battery, we're probably lining up a prep or our crash with those notes. And not every cymbal line does that, but I think that the more advanced ones and others are starting to catch on. And I think it's something that you sort of innately feel, but maybe don't always recognize. Like you can feel that what the symbol, how they're manipulating their symbols goes with the music without really tuning into that specifically. And that's something I really wish people in general paid more attention to. The fact that there's a lot of thought. They're not just doing tricks to do tricks. Some people do for sure, but a lot don't. And I think that is, something that's extremely special about the instrument as well.
I have a corollary to that specifically for indoor percussion. What's one thing that you wish more judges better understood about cymbals?
I think that that's definitely part of it. Lining up every motion movement with the cymbals. I think the other one is just the difficulty of what it takes to do some of those motions. Like the fact that, for example, let's say that you have a juggle type visual. We're doing this winter where we throw the cymbal under the arm. While it's midair, this cymbal is doing a flip. When we catch it, we're grabbing the strap, we're whipping the cymbal around, and we're playing a crash in time. Like, what's written on the page for us? One crash. In 8 counts, there's one crash. But the fact that we're using the coordination to put that together, that it also goes with the score, we're catching something midair and playing it in time. I think that is so crazy hard, and I wish that it was rewarded more. And there are some visual effect judges that do pick up on that, but I also think that should be seen from a musical perspective as well. It's just those are our chops and what it takes to be able to play those notes, and I would love for us to be rewarded for that on the tapes and on the sheets.
That's wonderful and definitely a very suitable call to action and something hopefully everybody can keep in their mind, both on the instructional and design side as well as the adjudication side, as we're looking at all of our amazing cymbal performers in the activity. Chelsea, we had a question that just came in from from one of the attendees that's with us tonight. And so I'll read that to you. It says, working on an extremely small budget, how often should I plan on replacing cymbals? And the context here is we use 18-inch crashes just during indoor season, not during the marching band season at all. And we just had a pair crack this season after only our 2nd year. What might be leading to that? Is this like a bad technique issue, or do they just not last that long? So kind of a 2-part question. What might be leading to that? And what is the standard idea that we should have in terms of replacing our marching cymbals?
Yeah. It's probably not bad technique, unless the cymbals are hitting together like this, which is extremely unlikely. I don't think it's bad technique that's going to cause that issue. I mean, it could be a number of things. It could be just how they treat the instrument. Are they throwing them down on the ground? Are they doing some of these advanced juggles and dropping them a lot? I mean, that is part of the risk, right? Is, if you're going to throw them up, there's certainly a chance that that they could potentially hit the ground. When we're practicing at Rhythm X, we have fold out mats that we put underneath of us to help take care of the instrument. And that's definitely something I highly encourage if they're going to do, some of those, more advanced skill sets. It also just could be the cymbal itself. So, for example, at Rhythm X, we use a Viennese cymbal that is thicker than a French cymbal. Some of the less expensive cymbals tend to be thinner. It's less material. It just costs less to make sometimes, and that could also be part of it. But I'd say for a cymbal to be cracked during its second season, it was either dropped a lot in a certain way, or maybe just wasn't the highest quality cymbal to start with.
Yeah. And I think it's probably also worthwhile looking at transportation and things like that too of those instruments. They're depending on how you're getting them from point A to point B. If these things are in a cymbal bag in a truck wedged between a couple of different things, that can sometimes be hard on our instruments as the trucks work their way down the road and are constantly braking and accelerating. You never know what may have crashed into the cymbal at some point and started causing some of that damage. So it's something to keep in mind as well. How about in terms of replacement? What would you recommend somebody think of in terms of the life cycle of one of these instruments?
Yeah, so one thing that's going to make them last is, if you have the opportunity to have a practice pair and a show pair, that's huge. Even if the practice pair are, very beat up, at least that means that you have a set that is looking good for the show scenario. As long as they're not cracked, you can use them for the most part. So I would definitely try and have two sets, even if the practice set is very, very old and, maybe shaped like a Pringle instead of a circle. And just trying to make sure you look as good as possible for the show opportunities.
And in terms of lifespan, you think that probably, I'm sure there's a bunch of factors that go into that in terms of
Yeah,
when they need to be replaced.
yeah, where you live, the temperature of, is definitely part of it. Different cymbal companies have different replenishment services. Like I know that Sabian doesn't charge, even if you're not like a Sabian artist, to replenish your cymbals, where they'll polish them and put the logos back on for you. And I know other companies have, opportunities like that. If anybody knows, you should certainly put it in the chat. But that's the one I'm certain of. It's all public on their website. So yeah, kind of seeing what the cymbal companies are able to do and what options are really out there for you.
Yeah. And I would say probably just like any other instrument, you use an instrument as long as it still is in good shape and it's operational and as long as the sound is good. So the point that your cymbals start to deform just through regular use or the sound is not what it once was, that's typically the time to start looking at replacement. And of course, we're all going to be hemmed in by just what the budget allows. So you've got to work within your specific budget when you're trying to figure out what level of quality to buy, and then just figure out how do we keep this nice and give it as much longevity as possible. That's going to be true for any instrument in our ensemble, I think.
And I'll say too, check out some of the world-class groups. A lot of them have the opportunity to sell their instruments at the end of the season, including cymbals. Again, depending on the company that they use. So that could be a great opportunity too, where you buy used cymbals, but they were some world classes show cymbals.
Right.
So they're very well kept and practically new. And
yeah, likely high quality right out of the gate. And like you said, well cared for during that season. So sometimes a great opportunity to get a fantastic deal on some high quality instruments.
For sure.
All right, got another question for you. This came from Victor, who is on with us tonight. Victor says, how important do you think it is to have a fall cymbal line as opposed to just adding it for the spring and the winter season?
Yeah, how important is it for you to have a fall snare line, a fall quad line, fall bass line? Like, do you think that the winter snare line would benefit from having a fall snare line, having practice and reps, marching and playing together? Like, for sure, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. When I taught high school all year round, we used the marching band season as sort of a training ground. Some of the marching band circuits don't even have percussion scores, you know? So we really took advantage of that and trained them up because you have all of the summer and band camp and drumline camps, and then the fall season where the show is just long, longer than a WGI season is. It's just such a great training tool, especially if you're from a school that has a lot of students. Usually the fall is a little bit bigger than the winter line is. So what ends up happening is you sort of get the core, highest talent possible. Back when I taught Centerville, I would teach a freshman on the cymbal line in the fall and the winter, and then that next fall season they'd go and try a drum like bass or quads or snare, and either they wouldn't like it as much or they weren't good enough to make the winter line, so they'd come back to the cymbals, which was always great because they had a year's worth of experience. Then they also just had this rudimental drumming season, playing a drum in the fall. They come back to the cymbal line just slamming and, I don't know, very confident in their instrument. And it's always just such a nice transition to sort of pick up where you left off, going from the fall season right into the winter. So if you can do it, highly recommend it. It's a blast, honestly, for them. Because teaching someone how to play an instrument fresh during a winter season, that's not a lot of time.
It's tough. Yeah.
So it's really, really tough. In a scholastic world cymbal line, I don't think we ever, in my 4 years of teaching at Centerville, I don't think we ever took someone in the winter line that didn't have fall or at least previous winter experience. So super beneficial for us.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. All right. So here's my next question for you. We talked a little bit earlier about Levine, which is the company that you started. And you told us a little bit about that. And certainly we've taken a look at some of the educational materials that you have there, again, for free, everyone, to check out and expand and further your knowledge. I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about the Cymbal Scholarship, because this is just one of the things that I think is one of the coolest things in our activity and around. And I just would love for everybody to know about this, and definitely want to highlight this amazing thing that you're doing. So talk to us about the Cymbal Scholarship. What is it?
Yeah, the Cymbal Scholarship, it's for cymbal players by cymbal players. It's fully funded by Levine Products. That's how it got started. Our first cymbal scholarship was given out for the 2012 DCI season. So we're 11 years in the making at this point. And it started with, I had this product, which is, the cymbal gloves. That's our original product for Levine. And I was using them just at Centerville, and then at Crossman when I was a marching member, people started to notice them and they're like, what are those? Just these gloves I make. And just sort of had this idea that, okay, well, I have this product. A friend of mine he had this idea to maybe start a scholarship, and we thought, okay, well, let's sell the gloves and fund the scholarship. And so I ended up reaching out to a very select few cymbal techs I knew just to kind of feel it out, like Jerry Charvet, who taught at Escambia for like 15 years, Oregon Crusaders Indoor, Pulse Percussion, and reached out to the cymbal techs I knew, and I said, hey, like, if I sold this product to fund a scholarship, would you buy it? It's all going to go towards DCI cymbal players. And basically everyone I reached out to said yes. So I was like, all right, great. So in 2 or 3 months, we raised $900. And then Don and Stephanie Click got word of what was happening. They donated another $300. So our first DCI cymbal scholarship was $1,200, gave away, every penny to 4 cymbal players. And we, haven't really stopped since. So it's over $30,000 worth of scholarships. We've expanded to every class of WGI. And we've done that practically a decade ago at this point. We are actually about to announce our 2023 scholarship winners after the weekend for this WGI season. So we're very, very excited for this next class of people and just help them pay for their membership fees. It has been the only scholarship that is specifically for not just cymbal players, but any dedicated subsection, and more specifically towards their membership fees. You know, there's always been a lot of scholarships towards school, which is great and extremely generous, but we really wanted to help with, you know, the rising fees. Even 10 years ago, you know, it's always difficult for a performer to pay for this activity, and we thought if we can alleviate just a little bit of that financial stress, then we want to do it. So if you go to the Levine website and make a purchase, whether that's cymbal gloves, pads, straps, a sticker, a t-shirt, whatever the case is, you directly donated to the cymbal scholarship. It wouldn't be possible without the sale of our products. It's fully funded by that. And that's how we give a bunch of money away. So if you're like, oh, I really want to help the cause, you may have already, and that's the way to do it. You don't have to donate directly to the scholarship. Just buy something for a cymbal player in need, and you're doing your part.
It's wonderful, and I love this idea of the community supporting the community. And so it's wonderful in both directions. I thank you very much for doing that, and hope now we've helped spread the word even further, and everybody's able to get in there on that and participate or clue in a cymbal player in need that that this is a resource that's out there for them, and might be a possibility to help make some of their dreams come true in these activities that we all love so much. Chelsea, we had a question that just came in from Brian, and it's very similar to the next question that I wanted to ask you. So I'm just going to ask Brian's instead. Brian says, so many people look up to you, Chelsea. Who did you look up to when you were marching? Or, you know, in other terms, like who inspires you? Because I know you are such an inspirational figure to a lot of people.
Well, it's very humbling to hear, and I appreciate that, Brian. The very first person who got me started on cymbals, her name is Peggy Smyers. She was my cymbal tech at United back in the day. I actually dedicated my book to her, and I'll just read, it's a couple sentence dedication to her because I think it really sums it all up. And it just says, thank you to Peggy Smyers, who instilled in me her passion for cymbals and changed the course of my life, which is, I mean, exactly what happened. You know, I started playing cymbals and I was all in and I loved it. And it had a lot to do with how passionate she was about the instrument. And I just really aspired to have a handling on the art form as much as she did and see it through fresh eyes always. And I felt like I got that bug immediately. And it had a lot to do with how she taught and how she carried herself and just the experience that I got as a performer in my very first season and exposure to the instrument itself. So I definitely have a lot to thank her for, and I try and do it all the time when it comes to something that happens in this activity. It all kind of goes back to the start to her.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I have two final questions for you, and then we'll wrap this up for tonight. My first one is, what do you love most about the indoor percussion activity, and kind of why is this so special to you?
Man, I want to relate it specifically to cymbals because that's, you know, what this call is about. And I think WGI is just such an amazing stage for performers, but specifically cymbal lines. I think it is one of the true places that cymbal lines are thriving. There's never this fight of, well, are we going to have a cymbal line this year? You know, because there aren't all these restrictions that WGI puts on the art form. It doesn't say that you can only have this many performers or, you know, your subsection can be this big. There's the rules are set up to a way that inspires designers and performers and the teachers to make everybody feel like they can be included, especially a cymbal player. And that's not always the case. Like should we have a fall cymbal line? Should we have a DCI cymbal line? You can justify it any way that you want. People win with cymbal lines. People win without cymbal lines. And at the end of the day, I feel so passionately about the instrument, and I want to make sure that people have the opportunity that I had as a performer, and I try and give back from a teaching perspective, and of course through the scholarship and products as well. But I think that WGI is so special in the sense that a cymbal line really gets to show off and be who they want to be in that arena at the end of the day. And it's why I keep coming back to it every single year. So
So well stated. Okay, last question for you tonight. And this, I want to turn the attention back to the performers once again. What piece of advice would you offer to a young performer that is looking to pursue cymbals as their primary instrument?
march for as long as you can. March every single season that you're able to. March WGI, March DCI, do your college band. These are all opportunities to learn and get better. I marched 11 independent seasons when I started. I never stopped until I couldn't do it anymore. And I gained so much perspective and information in those years of marching that I can now apply to my teaching and kind of spreading the cymbal gospel. Some of it is what not to do. Some of it is what you should do, of course. And I think that if you're really passionate about it, you need quantity to really expose yourself to everything that the instrument and that the marching activity has to offer. You never know. It's just a roll of the dice, really, how the season's going to go. If the talent's going to be standing next to you, who the tech is going to be, what the show is going to be, there's all these variables, the judges, the weather. I mean, the list is endless, and don't cheat yourself of that opportunity. Just march until you can.
That's such great advice and so wonderful to hear. Chelsea, this has been such a fantastic webinar tonight, full of amazing information. You've been so gracious and you've shared so much tonight. It's been just absolutely wonderful, and it's so great to be able to talk with you about this. You certainly are the kind of person that wears your passion for this particular instrument that we've been talking about on your sleeve, and I love that we're able to get that out there and share that with everybody. So I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I also want to thank everybody else that has been tuning in with us live tonight, all of our participants here, as well as anybody that gets a chance to catch out the webinar again down the road and spend a little bit of time with us. So Chelsea, once again, thank you so much for doing this with me tonight.
Yep. Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Great.
And if anybody has any follow-up questions about cymbals, you can reach out to me through the Levine website and I'll help you out.
Perfect. Thank you. And one quick plug, everybody, before we sign off for tonight, our next percussion community webinar is going to be taking place in 3 weeks. That is Thursday, March 9th. So go ahead and set your calendars for that right now. And Josh Torres is going to be joining us as the special guest for that one. So we hope you'll make some plans to join us live and participate in this. And as always, as your kind of your percussion education coordinator for WGI, if there's anything I can do to be of help for you, or if you've got any questions for me or questions for Josh or anybody else that's been on here as a guest, you can always shoot me an email. My email address is Caleb, C-A-L-E-B, @WGI.org, and you can reach out to me at any point. Chelsea, again, thank you so much. And everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight. We'll see you again down the road.